Hello friends, my name is Byron, and today we are going to analyze the mathematical essay that I developed in order to explain the theory of everything using known equations. So, why Stephen Hawking or Mr. Albert Einstein never thought about it? Well, that is also part of the uh, topics that we are going to discuss here. So, here is the presentation, the theory of everything, the unfinished equation of Mr. Albert Einstein and Mr. Stephen Hawking. This is a mathematical essay. So, is it possible to explain the theory of everything with equations? Is it possible to integrate gravity with electronuclear force in one equation? If so, what equation or group of equations will describe such interaction? The theory of everything, the unfinished equation of Mr. Albert Einstein and Mr. Stephen Hawking, explained by four equations. The first equation is Pythagoras, the second equation, Archimedes, the third equation is Fibonacci, and the fourth equation is Euler. So here are the equations presented, and I'm going to explain the meaning of each element. So the F stands for electronuclear force, or the standard model of the physics of particles. So electronuclear force is F. G equals gravity, M equals mass, H is a x point in the Cartesian plane, and K is a y point in the Cartesian plane. Vg stands for volume of gravity, V stands for volume, and Dm stands for mass volume, and pi is 3.1416, etc. So this is the standard model of particle physics, integrated with the theory of everything. So is it possible to unite this chart with gravity in one single equation? So this is the theory of everything in one chart. It means that on the first side of the equation, we have gravity at the upper left corner. And next to gravity, we have quantum theory or electronuclear force. So electronuclear force is divided in two branches: color forces, which derives into strong force, and the electroweak force, which is divided in the weak force and electromagnetism. And electromagnetism is divided into electricity and magnetism. So quantum mechanics has shown how three forces operate at the subatomic level: strong nuclear energy, weak nuclear energy, and electromagnetism. The unification of these three forces is known as the electronuclear force, which is the object of study of quantum mechanics. Therefore, while the theory of gravity focuses on the study of gravity force, quantum mechanics focuses on the electronuclear force. So here is the chart of the theory of everything. It means it's a combination between gravity and quantum theory, or the standard model of particle physics. So here's the first equation, Pythagoras, the triangle and the circle. So we have here that F stands for electronuclear force, G stands for gravity, M stands for mass, H is a x point in the Cartesian plane, K is a y point in the Cartesian plane, Vg is volume of gravity, V is volume, Vm is mass volume, and pi is 3.1416, etc. So here's an example where M stands for mass, F is electronuclear force, G is gravity. So here's the logical check. Starting from the Hegelian conception, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, we're going to develop the equation of the theory of everything using Pythagoras. How is possible or that a positive force, that is to say a thesis, a negative force, that is to say, an antithesis and a neutral force are related, synthesis. So this is the approach. At the atomic level, positive force equals proton, isn't it? Negative force equals electron. Neutral force equals neutron. On a social level, positive force equals assets, negative force equals liabilities, and the neutral force equals capital. At a cosmic level, positive force is electronuclear force, negative force is gravitational force, and neutral force is mass. So, if we unite two circles or two opposites, the result is a torus. As you can see here, the interaction of these two circles creates a torus. And you can also see that the shape of this torus is like a sphere. So, this is the simplified equation of the unity and fight of opposites, where M stands for matter, F for electronuclear force, and G for gravity. Matter squared is equal to electronuclear force squared plus the force of gravity squared. By applying this equation, the result is a circle when the center is at the origin. It could be a Big Bang, for example, a center of a star, or a center of a black hole. For many years, theoretical physicists, cosmologists, and astrophysicists have tried to determine an equation that describes a solution between the electronuclear force. It means the standard model of particle physics, and gravity. It is said that if the famous Higgs boson, means the God particle, is proven to exist, then its discoverer will win the Nobel Prize in Physics. If this particle is discovered, really all it will prove is that the weak nuclear force, the strong nuclear force, and electromagnetism are unified. I don't worry about finding that equation. It is not a mystery to me whether these three forces are united. I am starting from the point that they are united. Well, are they not united in the stars? How are they united? I don't know. That's a task for scientists who work in particle accelerators. At a theoretical level, their equations have practically already achieved unification. Their experimental verification is what is needed. But that will be somewhat tautological, since I believe that the best experimental verification of unification is neither more nor less than observation of the star of our solar system. It is obvious that the three forces of the standard model are unified in the sun, isn't it? So its experimental verification will only tell us what our eyes already tell us, that these three forces are unified. The electronuclear force, it means the F, tends to be repulsive. However, it is trapped in the gravitational halo of our star. This is where the dialectical relationship between the forces of attraction, it means gravity, and the forces of repulsion, it means electromagnetic force, is revealed. This dialectical relationship, what form does it take? Well, it's obvious that a circular shape isn't that the shape of our star. If we see the star from this perspective, because it's not a circle at all, it's actually a sphere. So that's why, instead of trying to solve the mystery of the incompatibility of gravity with electronuclear force studied by quantum mechanics, I start from the fact precisely of said contradiction. By add the square of said contradiction, the result is a circumference of matter, or said of another form, matter is a circular shape. However, the following points must be highlighted. Stephen Hawking already said that the universe shape is a sphere. What I'm going to tell you here is that he was wrong, because it's not a sphere, it's a torus. Now, a torus and a sphere, they are very similar, but obviously there is a big difference between the two of them. Until now, I have not said that matter is circular, but I have said that it only tends to be spherical and spiral, that is toroidal, for which reason the circle is not equal to a sphere, and even less to a toroidal sphere. For this reason, this equation does not fully describe the dialectical relationship of these two forces, but only makes an extremely simplified description in just two dimensions, where the x-axis represents gravity and the axis of the y represents the electronuclear force, whose dialectical union, the sum of these squares, when the origin is zero, inevitably form a circle. The verification of this equation is through the observation of the circular shape of our star, where gravity and the electronuclear force coexist in a complementary way, forming, in a simplistic way, the luminous circle that we call sun. Logical check. Starting from the Hegelian conception, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, we are going to develop the equation of the theory of everything. How is it that a positive force, that is to say a thesis, a negative force, that is to say an antithesis, and a neutral force related, synthesis? Well, this is the approach at the atomic level. Positive force is proton, negative force is electron, neutral force is neutron. On a social level, positive force equals assets, negative force equals liabilities, and neutral force equals capital. At a cosmic level, positive force equals electronuclear force, negative force equals gravitational force, and neutral force equals mass. So this is the simplified equation of the unity and fight of two opposites, where m equals matter, F is the electronuclear force, and G is gravity. So matter squared is equal to electronuclear force squared plus the force of gravity squared. By applying this equation, the result is a circle when the center is at the origin. It could be, for example, for a Big Bang description, the center of a star or the center of a black hole. So we have two solutions in this example. The first solution is where the center is different from the origin, equals h and k points with r as radio. So the origin of the star, this is a hypothetical point x with a radius 6 in the Cartesian plane. Point radius. So it's going to be -4, -2, and 6. Applying the canonical equation of the circumference, we have x minus h, everything squared, plus y minus k squared also, equals to r squared. So clearing the neutral part, we have to take the square root out, and we have that y minus 2 equals 6 minus x minus 4. So let's see how it looks. So as we can see here, the circle is different from the origin, and it could be used to represent the first star, which is different from the Big Bang. In this hypothetical scenario, a star with a radius of 6, we could infer that the balance between the positive and the negative force could have any combination. For example, gravity, x equals to -4, electronuclear force equals to -2. So this is an example. So if we take that x is equals to -4 and y equals to -2, we have the origin of this circle, and the radius is 6. So here we have a circle different from the origin. So the second solution, the origin center now is 0x and 0y. So origin and end of the cycle or the cyclic Big Bang. Because I have stated here in this essay that that's the most logical way to describe the Big Bang theory. That is not a never-ending increase of size or expansion, but it doesn't mean also that it is finite. So it is infinite, but how that is described? I'm stating here that the infinity of the universe can be represented with a torus shape. So the theory or the mathematical model that could describe the torus shape is going to be the equation that explains the interactions between two opposites. So here we have x squared plus y squared equals r squared. If we take the square root out, we have that 4 plus 2 equals 6. Isn't that true? So what does the line joining x and y mean? If it is a perfect slope of 45 degrees, it means that the liabilities and the capital are equal. But if the slope is not perfect, but more horizontal than vertical, then there are more liabilities than equity. If the slope is vertical and horizontal, it means that there is more equity than debt. Worse, on a social level. The sum of liabilities and capital equals assets, isn't it? So the sum of x squared plus y squared equals r squared. So here we are going to see how it looks. So what does this mean at the social scale? That a company or any other organization or individual who has assets represented by 6 units could have any combination of liabilities and capital. In this example, the capital is 4 units because the assets are 6 and liabilities are 2. So what does this mean at a cosmic level? What is the electronuclear force Y of a star, which mass equals to 6 units and the gravity equals to units? The answer is 2 units. It means that a gravity of 4 units by friction creates electronuclear force of 2. Therefore, a star of mass 6. What does this mean at a atomical level? If the electronegative wave has a radius of 6, is because the neutron has 4 units and the proton has 2 units. At a cosmological level, the sum of the force of the gravitational halo due to space-time deformation to the square plus the sum of the mass raised to the square is equal to electronuclear force or standard model of physics raised to the square. At the atomic level, the sum of the negative force of the electron squared plus the sum of the neutral energy squared is equal to the sum of the proton energy or positive energy squared. On a social level, the sum of the liabilities raised to the square plus the capital raised to the square is equal to the assets raised to the square. This equation demonstrates in 2 dimensions how thesis, antithesis, and synthesis are unified. So if we unite 2 circles or 2 opposites, the result is a torus, as you can see in this image. So we have seen so far that thesis, I mean electronuclear force, antithesis, I mean gravity, and synthesis, I mean mass, interact with each other, creating a circle or a circuit of matter, for example. We have seen also that thesis, electronuclear force, antithesis, gravity, and synthesis, mass, interacts with each other, creating a circle or a circuit of antimatter, for example. So matter circle and antimatter circle will interact, creating an explosion that takes form of a torus, as you can see in this image over here at the upper right corner. So now we are going to see the second equation, Archimedes equation of volume. So here we have that Bg equals 4/3 of pi multiplied or times electronuclear force cubed. Electronuclear force, gravity, electronuclear force is represented by F. G equals gravity, M is mass, H is a x point in the Cartesian plan, although here is not present. So volume of gravity is 4/3 of pi multiplied or times electronuclear force cubed, and pi is always 3.1416, etc. So where G is gravity and pi is 3.141592, F is electronuclear force, we have this example. We want to know the gravitational halo of a star. So what's the value of G? We don't know. But we do know that 3.141592 is pi. And we don't know also that F is any number. This is a hypothetical number, so it can be any number. So we're going to use number 2 for this example. So therefore, we have that 4/3 of pi multiplied for any value of the electronuclear force cubed gives us, in this case, 33.51 gravitational units. So this means that 2 units of electronuclear force cause a gravitational halo, space-time fabric curvature, of 33.51 gravitational units. Or what is the same that 33.51 gravitational units cause the agglutinated matter, the friction of the cosmic material found at the center of the star, for example, generating an electronuclear force of order 2. In other words, the amount of matter accumulated causes a time-space oscillation whose qualitative leap is translated into electronuclear force, which in this case is repulsive. But it is necessary to be clear that cosmological entities or the cosmos are not spherical, but follow a growth from the simple to the complex, governed by the law of quantitative to qualitative transit, which we have already explained it also, follows the pattern of the golden ratio. So this is the equation that describes this. Now, what equation describes the growing pattern of this sphere? The answer is the Fibonacci sequence. In this case, if we apply that, so we have that M is mass, G is gravity, and F is the electronuclear force. So Fibonacci sequences is to measure the growing pattern of a sphere of or a torus created by the interaction of two opposite forces. So this is the simplified equation of the unity and struggle of opposites transit from quantity to quality and negation to negation, where M equals matter in spiral form, and -1, it is a state of matter where a material quality predominates, either attraction or repulsion, -1 cycles. M -2 is the same state of matter where a material quality predominates, either attraction or repulsion, less 2 cycles. In the previous equation, it was established that the dialectical unit between gravity, it means G, and electronuclear force, it means F, is a sum whose result of its square is a circle. But now let's take the intellection further. Let us remember that following premises that we have established so far, the unity and struggle of opposites is what originates the movement of matter. That's the first phase. Said movement tends to add quantities. The accumulation of quantities inevitably causes a quantitative accumulation. Such accumulation reaches the brink of chaos. This is where a leap of change, a revolution occurs, which is apparently chaotic, but has an underlying order, whose trend is the golden number, 1.61803398, etc. Said qualitative leap causes the whole phenomenon to change its qualitative composition, causing a second phase, a second state of matter, whose quality is practically the opposite of the quality it had at the beginning, in the first phase. The new quality, as in the first stage, generates a quantitative accumulation until again a new edge of chaos is reached. Here again a leap of change, a revolution occurs, which is apparently chaotic but has an underlying order, whose trend is the golden number once again. So here is, at this point, a kind of comeback is made. The qualitative leap described in the previous paragraph causes the entire phenomenon to change its qualitative composition, causing a third phase, a third state of those of whose quality is practically the opposite of the quality it had in the second phase, and very similar to the quality he had in the first phase, but on a qualitatively superior basis. There was a denial of denial. This process is repeated to infinity, but not in a linear way, but in a chaotic way. Multiple clusters of matter collide with each other and co-determine through dialectical relationship between chance and causality. All this mixed in a great simple case. Is there a way to put all this into an equation? Of course. Let's begin to write the equation. G equals gravity, F equals electronuclear force. So we have G, gravity transforms into electronuclear force. Electronuclear force transforms into gravity plus. Gravity plus transforms into electronuclear force plus, which transforms once again in gravity plus plus, which transforms into electronuclear force plus plus plus, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So here we have a description of how this increase is taking shape. So what kind of shape does it take? The supernova represented by F is not isolated but occurs in multiple places in the cosmos. The difference between F and F plus is that at the beginning, F, or the Big Bang, without this meaning the beginning of everything, the electronuclear force was agglutinated at the original explosion, was in one place instead of now in F. Multiple supernova explosion occurs. Note that the negation of negation. This quantity of supernova generates a quantitative accumulation. It means a black hole. So here is how we can see the origin of a black hole. We have gravity, which transforms into electronuclear force. Electronuclear force now transforms into more gravity. Gravity transforms now into electronuclear force plus, and the electronuclear force transforms into gravity plus plus. So black holes are now represented by gravity plus. Note that now gravity is not agglutinated in a single point where almost total rest reigns, but in several places where almost total rest reigns. The black holes, this quantitative amount of severity, is a forming supermassive black holes until we reach the edge of chaos again, and the next qualitative leap occurs, F plus plus, and so on and so on. So this means that the electronuclear force now dominates everything, forming multiple hypernodes. This is represented by the sequence that we can see here, starting with G and ending with F plus plus. So these hypernodes accumulate, spraying the entire cosmos with new elements and enriching everything in their path. This qualitative explosion allows even more stars to form, which inevitably clump together, producing a negation of negation where gravity now dominates. It means G plus plus. Now that the galaxies are already formed, all of them around several supermassive black holes, the cycle continues, only now unifying galaxies in clusters of galaxies, etc. This summary is extremely simplified, but this purpose is only to illustrate the sequence. So this is how the sequence looks like, and these are the numbers. So we have number 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, and so on. So for example, if m equals 34, 34 minus 1 cycle equals 21. It means that a gravity equals 21. It means that electronuclear force equals 13. In other words, if the stars has gravity equals 21, the friction will create electronuclear force of 13, and that will create a star of 34 units of mass. So the number of spirals in numerous flowers and fruits also fits consecutive terms in this sequence. Sunflowers have 55 spirals in one direction and 81 in the other, or 81, 89, and 144. So, in body parts of humans and animals, such as the ratio between their height and the human being and the height of its navel, the ratio between the distance from the shoulder to the fingers and the distance from the elbow to the fingers, or the relationship between the joints of the hands and feet. So, in art, in violence, the location of the F, the ears, the holes, or the lid, is related to the golden ratio. It also appears in the relationship between height and width of the objects and people that appear in the works of Michelangelo, Dürer, and Da Vinci, among others. Here is a representation of Da Vinci's work and how he represents the Fibonacci sequence. So, another example of the Fibonacci spiral is represented by the location in space of the pyramids of Giza. And here is how we can see the pattern. So, and also it can be seen as a phenomena as gigantic as galaxies, the golden radio. So, many scientists have theorized about the importance of golden radio, and therefore the Fibonacci spiral. The problem is the mystical character that they give it. They confuse the cause with the effect. The Fibonacci spiral together with the golden number are not the cause but the effect. The cause is the unity and fight of opposites between space versus time, the electronuclear force versus gravity. This fight of opposites produces a quantitative accumulation with them, which then causes matter to enter a qualitatively different phase. This material transition must find the exact measure for chaos to be orderly, efficient, for which the golden number is imposed with iron necessity. The subsequent phases, negations of negations, necessarily follow the pattern of increase. Let us remember that the qualitative accumulation not only occurs at the beginning of the material phases, but also occurs in all aspects of the cosmos for which there is a great symplecé of entities that are co-determinate in a symbiotic relationship of causation versus chance. For this reason, the spiral shape is often not infinite in the ontological sense, since a galaxy does not grow infinitely, but to the extent that the number of stars allows it, before making another qualitative leap, quantitative transformation in quality. So the Fibonacci sequence evolves towards the theory of the Platonic solids as follows. As can be seen, geometric figures are formed from the Fibonacci sequence. The Platonic solids evolves towards the geometric figure called the flower of life. So here is the flower of life. So as you can see, first we have one circle, then we have two circles, and then we have several circles, and then more circles, and then more circles, and so on, until we have the flower of life, which is a combination of circles. So the flower of life contains the figures of the Platonic solids, the metatron's cube, the star tetrahedron, el hexahedron, octahedron. So as you can see here, a sphere is topologically to the integration of Metatron's cube, or the Metatron's cube volume could be equal to the volume of a sphere. So not only the union of two circles creates a torus, but this torus will have a sphere form. Therefore, the equation that measures the volume of a sphere is the same to measure the volume of a torus, since the sphere and the torus are topologically the same. Now, several spheres will create another torus because the space between each sphere creates emptiness and the Metatron cube form. So, what equation describes it all? I mean, not only the circle, but the sphere and the growing pattern following the Fibonacci sequence. This is the fourth equation, Euler's equation, the torus. So here we have the equation, 2 pi squared multiplied by g, and that multiplied by the electronuclear force squared. That's the torus volume. So electronuclear force equals F, G equals gravity, M equals mass, and H is an X point in the Cartesian plane, A is a Y point in the Cartesian plane, volume is gravity, V is volume, and Vm is mass volume. Pi is 3.1416. So, replacing the variables of this formula by the philosophical non-scientific categories established in this essay, we have that here we have the torus form equation. So, in geometry, the torus is the surface of the revolution generated by a closed plane curve that rotates around the coplanar exterior line. The axis of rotation located in the same plane, which with which it does not intersect. Its shape corresponds to the surface of objects that, in everyday speech, are called donuts, or rings or threads. The word torus is also used to refer to a toroidal polyhedron, the surface of revolution generated by a polygon that revolves around an axis. Torus generated by a circle. When the closed curve as a circle, the surface is called a torus. In everyday language, the body whose outer surface is a torus is called a ring, which illustrates the difference between a surface and the volume enclosed by it. It was assigned a number 1 to matter at rest to designate it, and 0 to matter in motion to represent its coming and going. And we have a torus in front of us. If we unify the number 1 and number 0, or two opposites. So, dialectical analysis of the first quadrant of the Cartesian plane. So if we have the axis of x and the axis of y, at the lower left corner, we will have the origin of the number 0, right? So what will be the opposite of number 0? I mean, at the upper right corner, what do we see? I mean, in the Cartesian plane, there is nothing. So where is the symmetry? So we need another kind of approach to understand that there is a symmetry. So the torus give us that approach. The lower left corner of the first quadrant does not look like the upper right corner of the first quadrant. But let's ask ourselves the following question. The x-axis is infinite. The y-axis is infinite. 0 is also infinite. Then why the axis of the x and that of the y, if both are infinite, do not join the 0, which is also infinite and is the origin of both lines? If the number 0 is the origin of both lines, the x and the y, and we accept that dialectical nature, that it is a continuous negation of negation, then shouldn't the numbers of x and y in some time return to the origin, but on a qualitatively superior basis? So here are two logical arguments that demonstrate that phenomenon referred to by the Cartesian plane is not linear. The lower left corner of the Cartesian plane must necessarily have a symmetry, which will have to be in the upper right corner. So the previously described symmetry seems illogical in the Cartesian plane, is a form or linear point of view, but it is completely logical in the same plane, is analysis and a spiral point of view that is dialectical. The previous argument is demonstrated with the progressive decrease of a number system. In the one that we currently use, the decimal, it is clearly demonstrated that the axis of the x is not linear but is spiral simply by analyzing the dialectical that exists between the number 9 and the number 10. So the number 10 implies a circular idea. It is returning to the 0 again, but on a higher basis. This shows that in reality the axis of the x and the axis of the y are not linear but spiral. See the following figure where the x-axis is represented as it really is. So as you can see, it does not matter if we use a decimal system, if we use a sexagesimal system, or any other type. The existence of 0 itself destroys the linear notion represented by Descartes, and inevitably forces us to embrace the spiral idea, both for the x-axis and the y-axis. Now, we will proceed to develop the spiral of the y-axis. So, as you can see, number starts from number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But what happens after 9? That we go back to the origin, to the number 0. So what does it mean? That the number 10 is one cycle. Now, what does it mean, the number 11? It means that it is one cycle plus 1. So what does it mean about number 12? It is one cycle plus 2, and so on and so on. So when we are at 1 cycle plus 9. What comes next? 2 cycles. So what does the number 20 means? 2 cycles. And what does the number 30 means? 3 cycles. And 35, 3 cycles plus 5, and so on and so on. And if that happens for the x-axis, the same happens for the y-axis. So if we have this, we have previously seen that it will form a torus, isn't it? So here is a linear vision of the first quadrant of the Cartesian plane. And here we have at the right hand the dialectical vision of the first quadrant of the Cartesian plane. So remember that the Cartesian plane for two number lines x and y, there are 4 quadrants, right? So if we have that two axes form a torus, what will happen if we have 3 axes? We will also create the same torus. It's going to be more complex, but it's part of the same torus, right? So what I'm saying is that the increase of the 3 numbers lines will be a vortex of spirals whose origin and end is always the OR. So the increment will have the following toroidal shape, which, by the way, tends to be spherical. So the volume of a sphere is topologically the same of a torus. So Dwayne Elgin said evolution means unfold and extend. So the question is, why extend in the universe? They are self-organized systems. We can notice different scales. A self-organized system is the technical term for a system that lives by itself. If we look at nature, we can see these kinds of self-organizing forms every day. We can see it in the cross-section of an orange. We can see it in the dynamic nature of a tornado, also in the magnetic field that surrounds the Earth. So here we have the torus. In a similar magnetic field around an individual, we can see the torus too. We can also see it in the structure of a whirlpool galaxy or in the structure of a small atom. So at a general ontological level, to say geometric, the origin is formed by the unity and struggle of two opposites, matter and antimatter, man and woman, etc. It means the vesica Pisces figure. So the vesica Pisces figure starts to increase following this pattern that we are presenting here, ruled by the Fibonacci sequence. Here we can see that the increase of the Fibonacci sequence creates the Platonic forms or the Platonic solids. So we have one circle, 2 circles, 4 circles, and so on and so on. So geometry, as you can see, is not only describing evolution of biology, but also evolution of cosmology. So here we have the Metatron cube. The Metatron cube, the star of tetrahedron, hexahedron, octahedron, icosahedron, dodecahedron, and all of them resembles the same kind of shape, which is a sphere. And a sphere is topologically equal to a donut or a torus. So the sphere topologically equal to the volumes of the Metatron's cube. And we can see here how we can measure that. And here we can see how 2 circles that describes 2 different and opposite forces like gravity and electronuclear force interacting with each other will create a torus of matter and mass. This is a more complex torus, but the essence is the same mathematical. It has the same mathematical principle. So contrasting the theory with reality, the Schrödinger model. The electronegative cloud shape can be represented by the Platonic solid equations, different electronic configuration for each atom, but all following the same Platonic solid principles. So we have with one orbital, two orbitals, and so on and so on. And we will see all kind of shapes appear in front of us. So all the shapes that are presented here can be analyzed with the same kind of mathematics using the Platonic solids. The unification of all the Platonic solids equals volume. So we have here different kind of electronic configurations, different kind of elements. So as you can see here, different electronic configuration will create different kind of atoms with different kind of electronegative clouds. It means different kind of Metatrons cubes or different kind of toruses. Now that we know that a torus represents the general shape of not only our cosmos but any other entity as the atom, we can apply that to the study of how life was originated. So everything starts with the contradiction, following the Hegelian principle, unity and fight of two opposites, positive and negative, matter and antimatter. So science has already proven that if we put matter together with antimatter, it will create such a huge explosion like the one was presented in the Big Bang. So, as we can see, after this explosion of energy, because matter and antimatter came together, after that explosion, matter begins to cool, and the first torus begins to take shape. So, as we can see here, that is how galaxies are formed in clusters, and later on, also solar systems. Thanks to his astronomy, Oparin knew that in the atmosphere of the Sun, Jupiter, and other celestial bodies, there are gases such as methane, hydrogen, and ammonia. These gases are substrates that offer carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen, which, in addition to the oxygen, present in low concentration in the primitive atmosphere and more abundantly in water, where the basic materials for the evolution of life were found. To explain how there could be water in this environment of the early Earth opening, started from the knowledge of geology. The 30 kilometers average to the Earth's crust made up a magnetic undoubtedly evidence the intense volcanic activity that exists on Earth. It is known that currently about 10% of the water vapor is expelled together with the magma, and it probably also happened in this way in ancient times. The persistence of volcanic activity for millions of years would have caused moisture saturation and all of this at the atmosphere. In that case, the water will no longer be maintained as steam. Opening conjectured that the high temperature of the planet, the action of ultraviolet rays and electrical discharges in the atmosphere, I mean lighting, could have caused chemical reaction between the aforementioned elements. These reactions will give us the rise to amino acids, the main constituents of proteins and other organic molecules. So the Earth's temperature originally high dropped to allow the conformation of water vapor. Many types of this also dragged along in this various organic matter in relative motion in inorganic matter at relative rest. Acids, however, the temperature existing at this time were still high enough for liquid water to continue to evaporate and liquefy continuously. When concluded that the amino acids that were deposited by the rain did not return to the atmosphere with the water vapor, but rather remained on the raw hot rocks. He also assumed that amino acid molecules, with the stimulation of heat, could be combined by peptide bonds. This will raise larger molecules of albuminoid substances. They will then be the first proteins to exist. In instance of rain for millions of years ended up leading to the creation of the first oceans on Earth. Then, where it was dragged with the rains, all these acids remained on the rocks. Now, proteins will accumulate in the planet, and the temperature of water will increase. Molecules will be combined. The interaction of the colloids led to the appearance of the quaterbates. A quaterbate is an aggregate of molecules held together by electrostatic forces. Those molecules are synthesized uh, biotically and operate called the protobiontons or quaterbates. A protobiont is a stable blood cells that is a prone to self-synthesis. If a suspension of proteins, polysaccharides, and nucleic acid is stirred, many macromolecules were included in quaterbates. It is possible that at the time there were already complex proteins with catalytic capacity, such as enzymes or ferments, which facilitate certain chemical reactions, and this greatly accelerated the process of synthesis of new substances. And in this order line of biological competition and growth, everything happened. The importance of operance theory is that it completes the more, uh, I mean, it overcomes the theory of the spontaneous generations, because note that the theory of spontaneous generation is curiously similar to the Big Bang theory. Both theories present the entities, cosmological or biological, as if they are appeared out of nowhere, as if by an act of magic the cosmological or biological entities appeared at once. If science has collapsed the theory of spontaneous generation, why do current physicists strive to revive it in their Big Bang conclusions? Isn't this wanting to return to the pseudo-scientific conclusions that have already been overcome? So, and in this order line of biological process, competition and growth speed are advancing with increasing importance on which natural selection will act, determining forms of material organization that is characterized of the current life forms. The importance of operance theory is that it completes the overcome of the theory of spontaneous generation. Note that the theory of spontaneous generation is curiously similar to the Big Bang theory. Both theories present entities, and as if they appeared of nowhere. So, Alexander Oparin, we have long fact that the development have followed and led to the appearance of life on Earth. In the beginning, we saw carbon dispersed in loose atoms by the glowing atmospheres of stars. Later, we found it as part of the hydrocarbons that formed the Earth's surface. Later, these hydrocarbons gave oxygenated and nitrogenous derivatives and were transformed into simplest organic substances. In the waters of the primitive ocean, these substances constitute more complex bodies. Proteins and other similar substances arose. This is how the material uh, for animals and vegetables was formed. At first, this material was simply dissolved, but then it separated, forming the quaterbates. The primitive quaterbates had a relatively simple structure. More gradually, essential changes were taking place in them. So they became more and more complex, and their shape more and more perfect, until finally they become primitive beings, progenitors of all life on Earth. Life continued to unfold. In the beginning, living things did not have a cellular structure, but at a certain stage in the course of their life, the cell appeared, firstly unicellular, then multicellular. So what I'm saying here is that in our days, when the internal organization of living beings has been studied in detail, we have more than well-founded reasons to think that sooner or later we will be able to artificially reproduce that organization and thus demonstrate irrefutably that life is nothing more than a special form of existence of matter. The recent success achieved by Soviet biology allows us to trust that this artificial creation of such simple living beings is not only feasible, but that it will be obtained in the near future. So that's what Oparin said almost 100 years ago. And today we can see that what Oparin stated is becoming real. So Alexander Oparin claims were confirmed by the Stanley Miller and Harold Urey experiment. This was made in the United States. So as you can read in Wikipedia, Miller and Urey experiment. The Miller and Urey experiment represent the first evidence that organic molecules can form spontaneously from simple organic substances. So here is basically the chart. If you want to take a look at some internet videos, how it was made, you will be able to find that this is true. So basically, other investigations or investigators following this procedure and varying the type and amounts of reactive substances have produced some simple components of nucleic acids and even ATP. This is experience opened a new branch of biology, I mean exobiology, science that studies life outside the planet Earth. Since then, new knowledge about DNA and RNA, prebiotic conditions and other planets, and the announcement of possible bacterial fossils found in meteorites from Mars, such as ALH 84001, have renewed the question of the origin of life. Stanley Miller, student at the University of California, he proposed to his director, Harold Urey, to carry out the experiment to counter the hypothesis of Alexander Oparin and J.B.C. Haldeman, according to which, in the conditions of the primitive Earth, chemical reactions have taken place to lead to the formation of organic compounds from inorganic ones, which subsequently originated the first forms of life. Urey thought that the results will not be inclusive, but finally accepted Miller's proposal. They designed the apparatus in which they simulated some conditions of the atmosphere of the primitive Earth. So this is the description. So the experiment basically consisted of uh, subjecting methane, ammonia, hydrogen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and discharges of 60,000 volts at very high temperatures. As a result, a series of organic molecules were observed, among which the amino acids glycine, alanine, glutamic acid, and aspartic acid stands out. Used by cells as the basic building blocks, synthesizes their proteins. The gas mixture was introduced into this apparatus, the water was kept boiling, and later the condensation was carried out. The substances were held through the apparatus while two electrons produced continuous electric discharge in another container. So after the mixture had circulated to the apparatus, samples were withdrawn by means of a stopcock for analysis. In this were found, as mentioned, several amino acids and carbohydrate and some other organic compounds. The experiment has been repeated on multiple occasions, obtaining various organic compounds. However, proteins have not yet been obtained. In 2008, other researchers found that the apparatus Miller used in his early experiment and analyzed the remaining material using more sensitive modern techniques. The experiment had included the simulation of other environments, not published at the time, such as gases released in volcanic eruptions. Subsequent analysis found more amino acids and other compounds of interest than mentioned in the published experiment. So, the impact of this experiment, along with the considerable geo and chemical evidence, help support the theory that is presented here. However, there are still scientists who are not convinced. The British astrophysics Fred Hoyle, opponent of the Big Bang theory and defender of a stationary cosmos of the time, compared the supposed possibility that life appeared on Earth as a result of chemical reaction with the equivalent of a tornado that, passing through a car graveyard, managed to build a Boeing 747 from the materials collected there. The consensus amongst biologists is that Hall's statistical interpretation is flawed, and they refer to this argument as Hall's fallacy. As can be seen in this figure, there is yet another check, the negation of negation. The water shown on the left side of the figure returns to the origin, but on a higher qualitative basis. This also confirms the toroidal and cyclical idea that has been embodied up to now. So we have talked about evolution of the human being, but what about the evolution of aliens? So it's basically the same. To think otherwise will be highly improbable and illogical. Previously, this way of thinking, panspermia, was seen by classical dialectical philosophers as a neo-religious attempt to say that life on Earth could have come from the heavens at the other historical moment in which the theory of panspermia was flatly denied by classical dialectical materialism. It was correct, but today, when thanks to the most powerful telescopes where we realize the immense number of stars in our galaxy, the immense number of galaxies, the immense number of clusters of galaxies, and even hypothetically the immense number of cosmos, then we can no longer continue to think that the Earth is unique and special. So we must inevitably accept as very possible and not at all illogical the idea that some molecules, bacteria, or other types of organic entities could have come to our planet by means of some celestial body or by means of some intelligent extraterrestrial entities. But that said, panspermia could have been possible only thanks to the fact that on this planet the physical conditions existed so that these organic entities could reproduce. So, can a child be born, grow, and develop isolated from other human beings? Of course, he does, but he will do it towards a wild form of experience. This is the analogy of Oparin's theory. So, it happens if another human being in childhood learns to sing, read, write, and educate himself through society. So, the answer is clear that the child will develop to a point that can understand the arguments of this essay. So his way of life will be different from the first case, a civilized way of life. From a biological point of view, both the first and the second children are real and biological life forms. The only difference is that the second had an interaction with other children like him. If we analyze the theory of panspermia under this theoretical assumption, it is not a crazy theory, but totally plausible, accepting that there is a physical and chemical exchange between our planet and other celestial bodies. It is a dialectical way of thinking. So to think that life arose only in this planet and totally isolated from the other celestial bodies is a kind of neo-Kantianism, to think that we are unique, special, and that we are isolated from the rest of the cosmos. So it is not necessary to investigate the dynamics of physical chemical exchange between different celestial bodies, because we are stating in this essay that it is the most logical way of thinking, that there was an exchange of not only biological elements, but another kind of exchange. So, which theory is the best? Oparin's theory, stating that the life is unique in this planet, or the theory of Oparin and panspermia, that life is on this planet developed thanks to the dynamic relationship between this planet and other celestial bodies that carried the primordial growth for the generation of life. Don't both theories complement each other in a unity and fight of opposites? So now we have seen how the universe and the galaxies and the solar system were formed, how consciousness is formed, obviously with the same principles, two opposites towards interaction with each other. So the story of Adam and Eve is an ancient way of explaining the same principles stated in this essay. So what I'm saying is that Everything starts with the contradiction following the Hegelian principle, unity and fight of opposites, positive and negative, matter and antimatter. We have a Big Bang and we have a universe, a new universe, because a baby is a subatomic universe. It is full of atoms, full of matter, and it is a universe itself. So a new universe is created. The universe multiplies itself. Hmm? And then matter evolves socially, which constitutes a collective intelligence that asks the question, how does it all work? And intelligence collects all the relevant information that the human being has documented and classifies, orders, and presents it in a logical and natural way. The toroidal figure not only demonstrates atomic mechanics, but also social mechanics and cosmic mechanics, and therefore the mechanics of intelligence, which reads and listens to discipline. So, two opposites interact with each other. One is fixed. It could be a square or gravity, for example. And the other is flexible. It could be a compass or electronuclear force, for example. The interaction of both forces create matter shaped as a torus. That is the synthesis. A torus evolves into any shape, including intelligence, following the Fibonacci sequencing, which resembles the letter G. It means that the square, the compass, and the letter G are symbols that represents the theory of everything, including intelligence. So the square and the compass is a symbolic way of representing the theory of everything. Thesis is a square, antithesis is a compass, and synthesis is a circle shaped from that circle-shaped form that grows following the Fibonacci sequencing principle, which resembles the letter G. So that is what the letter G means. So, therefore, it is the work of science to contrast the present mathematical model with objective reality, that is to say, to use the theorem of Pythagoras, Archimedes, Fibonacci, and Euler to the study of cosmology, because according to this essay, the theory of everything is not a problem of physics, but of logic. That is to say, that neither Einstein nor Hawking could raise the problem since they didn't know dialectical materialism, since said philosophical current was prohibited in the West, since it is the basis of historical materialism and of the Marxist and Leninist current of thought. So that is why no no Einstein, nor Hawking, none of them were able to use these four equations to study cosmos, because it is a problem of logic, not of physics. So that's why I'm stating here in this say that the theory of everything is not a problem of physics, it's a problem of logic. So these are the conclusions. The first conclusion, general ontological approach using dialectical materialism. At the atomic level, the positive force is the proton, the negative force is the electron, and the neutral force is the neutron. On a social level, positive force is active, negative force is passive or liabilities, and neutral force is capital. At a cosmic level, positive force is electronuclear force, I mean the standard model of physics of particles, studied by quantum mechanics. The negative force is gravitational force, studied by classic relativity, and the neutral force is mass, studied also by general relativity. So therefore, M equals matter or mass, F equals electronuclear force, and G equals gravitational halo. Minus one cycle equals the gravitational mass minus one time cycle, and M minus 2 is the energetic mass minus 2 times cycles. P P is 3.1416. The general, this is the first conclusion. Now, the second conclusion is that general ontological approach in two dimensions to obtain the circumference of the universe is explained by this equation. Matter squared is equal to the electronuclear force raised to the square plus the gravitational force raised to the square. General ontological approach, that's conclusion number 3. General ontological approach in 3 dimensions to obtain the volume of the universe. Gravity equals 4/3 of pi times electronuclear force cubed, or raised to the cube. General ontological approach that raises the quantitative to qualitative transition from succession to the formation of the Platonic solids, which are topologically equal to a sphere. This is equal to m equals m minus 1 cycle plus m minus 2 cycle. This is equal to matter equals gravity minus 1 time cycle plus the electronuclear force minus 2 time cycles. General ontological approach, which raises the quantitative to qualitative transition from a sphere to a toroid, since they are topologically the same. So matter equals 2 pi squared multiplied by g multiplied by electronuclear force squared. So these are my recommendations. It is recommended to teach set theory to mathematics students so that they understand that the universe is equal to a qualitative or quantitative abstraction of a phenomenon to be analyzed. A universe can be an apple, a human being, a star, matter, antimatter, the cosmos. The universe contains sets. The sets of the universe interact with each other. The present mathematical model presents the universe as a phenomenon that has a toroidal shape, therefore topologically is equal to a sphere, as Stephen Hawking concluded, because he was right about that, but he left that as something very simple because he didn't dive deep into the real form of the sphere, and the real form is the torus. So, number 2, it is recommended that students be taught mathematics as the Pythagorean theorem is implicit in the patrimonial equation. Therefore, it can be used to analyze the interaction between positive, negative, and neutral forces. That is, between the electronuclear force, the gravitational force, and the mass. Number 3, it is recommended that students be taught mathematics as the Archimedean theorem can help determine the volume of a sphere. It is recommended that mathematics students be taught how the Fibonacci sequence theorem drifts towards the geometric formation of the Platonic solids and how this is related with the law of transformation between quantity and quality. And number 5, it is recommended that mathematics students be taught that the torus theorem is topologically equal to the volume of a sphere and universally describes contradiction, the transition from quantity to quality, as well as the negation of negation following the pattern of the Fibonacci sequence, which leads to the geometry of the Platonic solids, whose volume is topologically equal to a sphere, which is topologically equal to a torus. Number 6, the dialectical materialism does not contemplate immaterial entities, but only material entities. Therefore, it is methodological backwardness was improved by the Spanish materialist philosopher Gustavo Bueno, who created the concept of noumeno to describe entities that cannot be perceived but do exist, such as subatomic particles. This new materialism is called philosophical materialism, which consists of posing a materialistic problem and finding a solution through a mathematical model, making philosophy equate with mathematics as it was originally in the classic Greek philosophy. Philosophical materialism only provides theoretical mathematical models, which must be contrasted with objective reality through scientific method. So here we have the biography, and this is the end. Thank you very much for the opportunity that you have given me of presenting my point of view about how a positive force interacts with a negative force and how that interaction provides some sort of balance. And that is the approach we need to use if we need to unify quantum mechanics and general relativity. I mean, both of them are opposites and therefore they are united. How they get united? Not in just a simple circle as the Eastern culture teaches, showing, for example, the shape of the yin-yang symbol. But the square, the compass, and the G is a more complex explanation and a better explanation of how two opposites are balanced with each other. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and you can confirm that everything that was presented here can be proved mathematically and by observation. The shape of the star is a sphere. The shape of the galaxy is like a spiral. So the theory of everything from that point of view is not a physical problem, but a logical problem that was solved in this essay. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.